The second part of the workshop is typically this board is a lot more blank. But you guys have actually given us a lot of information. And so what I decided to do this morning was to begin it and begin to test some of what I think are my early gut reactions that are directional for what we can focus on moving forward. And have you guys fill in the gaps or tell me absolutely not, that's wrong. So that, because the result of this, what happens after this, okay, let me reframe the conversation. We are experience designers. And what we do is we focus on creating persuasive communications using technologies that have never been used before. That's kind of our sweet spot, which happens to be perfect for working with you guys. What we're gonna do is after we leave here with the technological information we've gotten, the strategic business sort of creative vision, and the business need, we're gonna return a document. And this document is going to collapse together all of our findings. It's going to result in some recommendations, and it's going to result in some directional creative and work processes moving forward. So the goal of today is basically after the first session, got a lot of strategy stuff, starting to get closer to what you might want to start working on. And I just want to test some of these things out. So in the technology aspect and then this is really focusing more on the creative message and how that's expressed through a demo or any other amount of materials. So when we were talking about technology 2 days ago and we went through that whole list, I split the technology into 2 categories. And the technology basically creates richness. That richness is supported by rigorous innovation. So the richness is the things that you can touch, see, and feel, so to speak, that's intuitively understood. And the rigorous innovation is the stuff that needs to be explained, things that are invisible to the eye and the experience, things like battery processing, things like this. We need that kind of simplification right now. Of course, we're going to unpack it into all the details when we start creating things, but that simple packet allows us to think about what we need to make. I want to talk a little bit about the experience so far of the current demos. And of course, everything you guys have made are iterative steps to try and prove out a specific element of the technology, right, from an experience point of view. What I think is interesting is that I think moving forward, now that we've seen your product roadmap, it makes a little bit more sense to us. But how we can be enormously critical as a group as to how some of these demos, what the form factor of the experience is to demonstrate a piece of technology. So for example, in full transparency, our team far more enjoyed the first demo, which was much simpler. It's not the helmet, because there were less variables or less points of failure to actually understand just super simply what the unique sales proposition you guys have is, which is this beautiful, wonderful image. It was also because you can user correct for yourself. It's very simple. Now, of course, you don't have all the bells and whistles, but the form factor of the existing system introduced so much additional error that it obfuscated the beauty of what you guys have created. Now, I know that's a step on the way. Now that we've seen your product roadmap, obviously that's going to get better. And obviously you have to be demoing with a helmet, right? So you can get the full experience. But there's something interesting about making sure that as we move forward and we think about the demos, whether you really what the best application, the form factor of the technology in relative to what you're trying to say in the demo is always critically analyzed so that you're not trying to do too much at once. Right now it feels like it's a lot of things trying to be solved at once, and I think that's part of the complication of the technology you guys are building. All these different things have to work together to get that one experience. There might be cases, what I'm saying, I'm just bringing up the possibility, there might be cases where some of your demos might need to be simpler, elegant, just stand up really quick, see it like the Steadicam, or it doesn't have to be the Steadicam, something like that. But in case something fails over here, you have somebody that has 5 minutes to understand what's going on. You need that, what's the business card version of your demo? I think you need to have something that maybe doesn't require half an hour to set up, or it might fail. So I'm suggesting that as a backup going forward. And then just making sure that we all have a dialogue as we go forward, thinking about what we want to accomplish on the form factors. And then of course we'll figure that out, come October when everything gets a little more stable and lighter and more comfortable, and we'll have these different variations. We'll figure out what demos should be on what form factor. Okay. The other thing I wrote there is not all and not nothing. So I think, for example, all bells and whistles, all technology running, but this enormously complicated demo. If you imagine what the upper reaches of all these things combined to be, you see lots of different points of failure. So potentially for the user experience. So what we'll do is, again, that critical review of it doesn't have to be all, and it certainly can't be nothing. So we have this ability, that flexibility for you guys when you're here and you have different clients coming in. Not all, not nothing, figure it out, but you have a system to work with. So your demos there aren't points of failure. Okay, so that's from the experience. Cool so far?
Great.
Cool,
Yeah.
all right, okay. Voice, I think voice is actually really easy with you guys. You're basically the antidote to Magic Leap. Magic Leap is fantastical, whimsical, pixies and jellyfish and Star Wars and all that stuff. And what you're answering that with precision, rigor, and there's a grounded sensibility to the iterative way that you're working on your innovations. And you're willing to talk about them and share them. And you have a level of passion and obviously intelligence to be able to really get into the weeds about these things. And we're gonna celebrate that, because that is effectively one of your biggest differentiators with a lot of startups, especially in this category. However, what I think we need to focus on a bit is getting closer to the vision of the future. How does all of this information get collapsed together and is connected to things that helps understand people? I think investors in technology companies, they're not just buying the technology, they're buying your vision of the future, and this comes into making it real. Like, what is your perspective on proprioception or data as a sixth sense or IoT? Not that you have to do all that in a demo, but you should definitely have a perspective on that. And that your vision of the future is, when I was doing probable, possible, and plausible, what is the preferred future according to EyeWay? And right now it's not in all this time we spent together. I don't know what your preferred vision of the future is. And it needs to just be really, and then that one vision of the future, it's in your presentations, it's in the way that you talk about the product, it's in the demo, you hit it over and over and over and over again. So we're gonna kind of help clean up some of that communication, I think. Which takes us to the message. Not joking around again, I'm not gonna pull you guys' leg. What you guys have done, you are fulfilling the promise of AR, and that's really exciting. And that also needs to be the message. You are fulfilling the promise of AR, the equivalent of, when I was a kid, I always thought I was going to grow up and have a jetpack. Where's the promise of my jetpack? You guys are fulfilling the promise of AR. That is what you have to tap into in your message. And I think that because you, culturally or tonally, you guys want to be a little bit more understated, but that it's not that it's brazen, but it's like you are. There's no joke. You guys are fulfilling the promise. So let's make that like your lead line. This is what the promise looks like. This is how it works. This is how it feels. This is how it, but just getting that mechanical to clear, and that will also be in your demos. Let's see. So in the message, there will have to be two components to the message, because after we talked about your audience and your competitive set, which we still need to get clarity on, but even if we squint at it, there's two crowds. There's the VC C-level executive, and then there's the tech evangelists, or what I call the tech attack, right? So, and they both have two things. The first group needs you to make it real, and the second group wants you to prove them wrong. So, and I think they kind of work in this order, and I was kind of doing that in the first workshop, that we need to figure out. And again, when I talk about the demo, I'm not talking about the moment they put on the headset. The demo starts when they walk in that door, right? So I'm thinking about the whole thing. So what happens the moment they walk in the door? How do you make it real? And then how do you follow up? You might, because you only need this for specific crowds. You always need this. But this is your finishing move. This is when I was talking about the killing room, this is your finishing move right here, and that's for the people that don't believe you. And this is honestly the easy part, because you guys have all of this. What you're not focusing on enough is this, and this. So anyway, when we come back with the document, we'll probably start writing out what almost feels like a script. It feels like, again, from the moment you come in to the moment you leave, and the different steps in the experience and how it kind of works. Cool so far?
Yeah.
Okay, this is kind of like a trailer for the document we're giving you. Again, this is not typically how I do a workshop, but you guys have given us a lot to work with, so forgive me for jumping to conclusions and just say no if you don't hear something. Yeah.
I'm good with no.
Well, that means when you get the document, you're like, okay, cool, this makes sense. I can see it all in one place. Okay, so I want to talk about the experience format. The experience format, again, from the door to the door. There's two story formats in interactive storytelling that are really interesting, that are used to various degrees of success. There's the walled garden, which is basically a video game that doesn't allow you any real choice. There's only a certain way you go to accomplish a goal. You accomplish a goal. Lots of technology startups, regardless of whether it's AR or any other technology, when they demo it, they make a walled garden. You get to a thing, check the box. You get to the thing, check the box. And you're just kind of moving through, but it doesn't feel real, because in real life you make decisions. So in this effort to make it real, I'm suggesting thinking about, when we think about the whole demo, of the rubber band. And the rubber band is basically, this is also used a lot in video games. There is a linear flow and a series of checkpoints that you cannot skip through, but there is the illusion of choice that makes it feel like you've affected change on the experience. What I mean is, what's a good example? There was a really great zombie video game that did this really well. I'm totally forgetting it. Okay, anyway, the point is, here I meet somebody, and I choose to say yes or no. I say no, and I feel like the next thing I experience is because I made that decision. In fact, it is not. And it's the way that you write and create an experience, but that illusion of choice is going to make everything you guys do, make it feel more real. So when we're thinking about the demo, we get into this idea of islands and chapters. So islands, basically, I use the term islands because each island is going to hit a specific point of your vision of the future, and also the unique sales proposition within your technology. So this is really about field of view. This is really about the sharpness, like I'm doing live translation. We're gonna have in the background, we're gonna write these mandatories, and these are the islands. But
that's basically what we have in the simpler demo.
yes.
Each image is an example of something.
Exactly. But what I think it needs to feel more like, though, is instead of islands, you have chapters, so that it is one continuous thought, and each element of the demo you go through is laddering up over time to again make a full picture. It's not, here's a fish, here's a dragon, here's a human, which is how most demos are done, right? And it's like, here's voice control, here's, and honestly, everybody does that. I think because you guys have a deeply complicated series of innovations, it's very hard to be like, okay, we're just gonna do this, we're just gonna do this. By the time you're done, your ringtone, man.
I'm gonna Spanish first and get my laptop.
Okay, so what I want you guys to start thinking about, what we're gonna think about is, by the end, there should be a holistic, like intuitive understanding of what is so great about your technology. Right now, you can't have that if it's fish, human. It's a bunch of like.
You don't sum it.
Right, and you don't have a vision of the future, right? So, and so the way that the experience will work, it's like ramp up, wow, that's amazing, and then drop off a little bit, take a break. It's like a roller coaster. The way that we write the demo, and then by the end, you're way up here. You're just building on top of each experience until the end. You're like, obviously, this is the future. Obviously. And that's what we have to get to. It has to be obvious. Okay, so that's sort of the experience format that I'm kind of thinking about. Okay, so reference. You guys gave us lots and lots of reference. I wanted to print out a bunch of pictures, but I decided to just print out two. And all those references we'll be going through again. Before I return the document to you, I'm going to find other tiny little elements and themes in there. But I actually wanted to start with this image. I think you gave us this image.
Junior runs.
Yes, this is the RT20. This is one of the most beautiful radios ever made, my personal opinion. And after listening to Boris and listening to you guys and looking at a lot of the references, I put this down as like a North Star. And it's a North Star in the way that Dieter Rams was a functionalist. That was his design school. And he always said, less, but better. Now, what's interesting about this is not only is it aesthetically pleasing, not only is it enormously intuitive to understand what you need to do with it, and not only does it have it has just enough to be able to function, but also be an aesthetically beautiful object. I think that kind of plays into how we think about interface. I think that plays into your whole design aesthetic can be here, which I think is super cool. But what's also cool about this, there's this extra thing that because Dieter could do this back then because radios had an on, off, a turn, AM, FM, you check the change the band. The future, what's the Spotify version of this? What's the voice activated version of this? And as people, we're working, again, when we work with Facebook or anybody else that's designing hardware, they have to squeeze in all of this extra functionality. But the future, the vision of the future is, you don't need to, because the digital augmentation turns any dumb object or simple object into a complicated object, depending on what you want. This is going to be part of your demo environment. This idea that this pen is imbued with magic powers, this radio is imbued with magic powers, and it responds to my wishes and dreams because I have EyeWay technology. So not only is it beautiful, not only is it aesthetic, but you're showing how EyeWay is a catalyst for the future to bend to your whims. And I think that's that extra piece of subtext that gets you back to vision of the future. While we're still doing, fidelity and all this great stuff, but you need that, because that is also going to make it real. Okay. This kind of culminates in, I actually give a talk about this. That when they walk out, they realize that EyeWay is building the sensorium for the future. That data will effectively be a sixth sense. This idea, if the human senses are about how you translate reality, but when you have really sophisticated augmented reality, it changes your perception of real reality. It changes the way you interact with the world and how you consume it. Data, I believe, is going to be humanity's sixth sense, and that is kind of how we can play with the entire demo environment, how you're going through it. You have this ability to, we're not going to make it fantastical. It's not about, I love the idea about reading emotions and lie detectors, but that's too fantastical for what your demo should do. That's going to introduce disbelief, which you don't want. But there's a subtle way if we keep things in the back of our heads as a brief. Data is a sixth sense, data is a sixth sense, revolutionizing the analog world. It's going to be really interesting. I put Vaporwave up here because that wasn't the list. I think that was from Boris, music reference, which we'll come back to at some other point. It's not that important right now. The other thing that I really, after I saw the Dieter Rams, and again listening to Boris and listening to all of you guys, I landed here. Have you guys seen the movie Her by Spike Jonze? Yes? No? Okay.
I'm always kind of like that.
Okay. I'm going to ruin it for
It's
you.
one of my favorite movies of the world.
Yeah. Her is...
It's terrible.
Her. I put this image here. It's hard to pick a perfect image, but it's Joaquin Phoenix. Spike Jonze directed a film that takes place in the very near future. And what he does so well, it's not so much just about the story, but it's the production design of what he did. It is an austere film. There's no ornament to the clothing. There are no cars. There's no floating cars. There's no whiz-bang lasers. There's none of that crap. But it's one of the most deeply futuristic films I've ever seen. And because he's basically being the Dieter Rams of filmmaking here, that austerity allows him to create these two different islands in the film that are so fantastical, but you don't disbelieve them. There's a component where he's playing a hologram projection game, right? And it's cartoonish and weird, and you're like thinking, how does this even work? But most people don't think about it because the rest of the film is so austere. It's just like, oh, of course, that's fine. He falls in love with an artificial intelligence that's, this enormously complicated piece of technology, but it looks like a little leather notebook, right? That's cool. That's the Dieter Rams sort of analog thing. And then at the end, the fucking singularity happens. Like the AI gains consciousness and joins all the other AIs. In the end, you're like, wait, what? he can go way out in outer space because he spends all the time making sure that it's austere, it's believable, you can touch it, you can see it. This is a future you can believe in because there's no flying cars, that kind of stuff. All right, so her, I feel like that is your spiritual North Star for storytelling and feel and tonality.
Apologies.
We're all good so far?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Moving on.
Okay, so this is story. Yeah.
Error is from point of singularity, I mean, what part of, because there's.
At the very end of the film, if you recall, Samantha says she can't be with him anymore.
Yes.
And she has to go and join the others.
Yes.
This idea that the software has gained consciousness enough to realize that they need to evolve on their own and achieve a new level of consciousness. And so that to me seems like that's his wink at the singularity when technology takes off at a point that we can't begin to predict what's going to happen anymore, right? It's the black hole in futurism.
Yeah.
So the story, this is again just a little tease. The document we return is really going to get into the weeds here. But again, going back to teacher rounds, going back to making it real, going back to vision of the future. Your demo story is about an enabled future, again, where EyeWay is the catalyst for experience. I also think what would be interesting, and we'll play with this, integrated docents. So the docent is whoever's in the room during the demo. And instead of, I believe to suspend disbelief, the docent is actually almost like a character in the near future. Not that it's like space age, it's not immersive theater, but they're participating in your demo in a way that it feels like, of course, this is a Tuesday. It's not, you're in a demo space at EyeWay with a technician. You're sufficiently in the near future. So that you're writing a script and finding a natural way to say, is it working? Do you see everything? Please do this next. Instead of saying that, there's a way to integrate it into the demo where it feels much more natural. And less like you're in a room with somebody watching you, making sure that everything works. As a person that's gone through a lot of demos, it's distracting. It's always distracting.
And we do it too, when we do it.
We do it too, because part of our business, we give tons of demos.
Yeah.
Because to see our work, we have to demo it.
Yeah, just with all honesty, we got to a point. So we realized that.
Yeah.
We rehearsed heavily the demo narration process.
Mhm.
And then after we reached, then we reached a level, we reached a more fluent level, and Ilya even wrote a script for it. And then we had also just malfunctions.
Yep.
And then we needed to put near operability over the story.
Right. Yeah. But see, there's even yesterday we were talking about the raccoon and color coding the raccoon so that you spend, I was actually timing it. It took almost 15 minutes to go through the caveats of what was not your technology and what was wrong with it, rather than talking about what was good about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as you move forward, that's always going to be a problem. You're always going to have to caveat because it's a prototype. But how can we create something that is simpler and elegant where we're not focusing on what doesn't work or what will be coming and just be like, this is what it is, isn't it amazing? We have to step away from all the stuff that, doesn't quite work yet. So we can help with that. And I think that's going to be part of the script and that's part of the whole experience going through. Again, the whole point of this, to make it real for these people, we have to suspend disbelief. So again, by the time you go through all the caveats and you say, do you see the fish and is the fish occluded and all these things, it's already, it's not the near future, it's a prototype demo in a room with belief. So we got to take care of that. Okay, so some story elements. When I'm thinking about the chapters and the islands, there's some things we'll play with, and basically we'll create these like 2-sentence synopses of what can happen in these different islands. What's really interesting is responsive architecture and IoT. Again, going back to teacher ROMs, how does a room respond to my natural language, or how I'm feeling, or my voice, or where I'm looking? All the dumb architecture in the space, tables, furniture, whatever, should be able to respond to some element. So that's a really interesting futuristic thing that should be incorporated along with IoT. Again, this is kind of an easy trick to do for you guys. It's not like you're inventing anything. You're just simply incorporating it into your demo. How do I communicate with others? Again, this is something that's interesting when you work in an integrated docent. Does part of the demo require you to have a conversation with the person in the room to facilitate some sort of connection between them, but also demonstrate what's your vision of communication with EyeWay technology? How is AR going to change the way that we talk to each other? Right now, in your shopping demo, there's a video of a woman sitting at a desk telling you to buy stuff. Okay, I can watch video on AR. What can we do better than that in your demo? I think translation is really an interesting thing, going back into the sharpness and going back into turning dumb objects into smart objects. What does a book look like in the future? What does a magazine look like in the future? What does a movie poster look like in the future? Does it also translate live? Does it turn into Mandarin? Does it turn into Hebrew? Like this kind of idea where you're then proving, you're showing your sharpness, you're tracking the foveated quality of it, but you're doing it in a practical sense. Like, I can see how this is going to work in the real world. Analysis is really interesting. When I look at an object right now, you're doing analysis in your shopping experience, right? How much does this cost? What are the ingredients? But I think we can, if we incorporate it all into a series of chapters and you're going through one experience, what am I analyzing that is one step away from the obvious, like how much something costs? Like that we can still infer that, but we can make it a little bit more interesting. And then portals, which also you guys are working on. This idea of how do I get to social media? What is the borderless computing aspect of this? What's the function in relationship to the internet, social media, email, whatever. So we'll figure that out. So that's just the beginning of stuff. There's going to be a lot more. And this is where I think we're working with you guys a lot to discuss what you found, what's interesting, interaction models, figuring out what the islands are. Okay. I'm moving relatively fast, but so far so good.
Very good.
All right, publishing, I'm not going to get super into because fortunately you guys do have a product roadmap. And if I was to squint at it, we're spending a lot of time working with the UX team up here until October-ish. So this is really about us sharing knowledge and sharing what has been successful and what has been a failure. And honestly, it's almost easier to identify failures, make sure we don't repeat them, or things that we should pick up and try again. And then create some sort of test environment that maybe does one or two of these things that proves out what the vision of the future might look like with visual fidelity, and we pick one or two of these things and we start testing it, making sure it's going to work and feel good with you guys. Looks like a V1, a full demo experience is probably around Q1, depending on when all of this stuff is done and it works. And then V1, it's almost like a beta, but I think what Boris was saying yesterday is that you start wanting to put not the public, but people visiting through a more rigorous demo by Q2 next year, sometime this summer, right? Okay, so this is about as much fidelity we're going to get with the schedule for now.
But I think in that regard, one thing that I'm missing here is, I mean, I'm sure you guys can work with whatever hardware we have, that's what you'll do.
Yeah.
But I would like to hear, doesn't have to be this minute, but in the document you're talking about, what do you view as what we call the minimum viable product for a demo?
Yeah.
Because to take an example, the helmet we have today is a no-go, but what is the minimum you think that we need to come with? Because our timetable, obviously, we have a plan, we're trying to keep it, but things change and things move and things don't happen exactly like you want, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we have to, at least for ourselves, understand what you guys think. Okay, look, we can do great with this. This is the minimum. If you don't have this, then let's wait with it. Because the effect will be worse if you try to demo your helmet today. Better not demo it. Demo BPIP2. Demo that demo. Don't show that one. That's what I'm hearing from you. I completely agree, by the way, because I think that one is too complicated, too cumbersome, not convincing.
There's one other aspect to this that I feel that we may. So we talked about this, but we haven't talked about the frequency of demonstration.
Yes.
And this is something that I feel like we need to say. So even though we shy away from publicity, and we are not presenting at trade shows. The frequency of demonstrations is fairly high, so there is something about this company that raises interest with those types of corporations, and they visit regularly. So every 5 weeks we have some.
No, it's gonna go up.
Okay, and
Towards the end of the year, it's gonna
Yeah.
go up.
That's one thing.
We're gonna initiate.
So there is a question, and then I have another question that I feel we would like to say. So one is, what do you think, which is not the main task I realize, but what would you do with what we have now until we have something better? Okay, so what would you, that's at the interim, because we need that, and we know that we need that. That's one thing. The second thing that we have, and we'd like to mention, are companies seeking to cooperate. So for example, Snap. Let's do a demo together. Yes, no, maybe. It's another thing that goes on.
That's a real one that we need an answer by the end of the month.
Okay, all right, cool.
I want to tell something on top of what Ryan said about.
I'm gonna sit down for a second.
I will tell something what Ryan said about the consideration of the mechanical design of the
Yes.
of the demo. These will be the real decisions that we can change. So if you
Right.
tell us these are the limiting factors, then we can adapt to them. So it's very urgent. I just want to stress.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very. It will have very real influence in the short term.
Yeah, and I think that like the new prototype we're working to with based on the PSVR headwear is probably going to be hopefully a better user experience. You know.
Yeah, but I have options of even the
Yeah, absolutely. And
manual degrees of freedom, automatic, smaller.
Yeah, but one of the things
like
we were
they're not
getting
on-
last week for this demo is how much do we want to be touching people's heads, moving their face around, but we couldn't do it without.
Right.
We just can't, and that's gonna be for one.
yeah, I totally
So
understand.
like understanding what Albert's saying, that understanding which parts are we need to focus on improving
Yeah,
on that side of the experience.
like of course we have some opinions in terms of discussions.
Of course, of course. Yeah, we can make all the recommendations in the world, but there's also at a point you guys are the experts, and so you'd be like, well, no.
No, they are probably.
Yeah.
So make sure. No, I want to make sure that Albert survived. There are probably. So this is how I look at it. There is a very talented team here, and at the interim phase, if directed, we can change fairly a lot, regardless of the far end goal, which is also interesting. This is one point.
Yeah.
And it also goes to Albert's comment. So let us know what you think. We can make fairly big changes in hardware, in prioritizing what comes first and second. So for instance, you heard Albert say yesterday, I'll take a small example, just pops into my Unreal. Okay, we need to put in a month in order to do that, but maybe putting an extra month in Slam.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So
And that's
now
something that,
those
for example,
Yeah.
okay, so let me return back to your original, because it's all connected to what you originally asked, which is making recommendations by the MVP. We are going to be doing that, and the recommendations from a user experience, and I'm going to get to these results about creating bridges between creative engineering and business, but a good example of that is, do you spend your time on Unreal? I don't know, Lau and I will talk about this later, and we'll talk to the rest of the team, maybe not. Like there, we might be able to figure out a way that to make sure that your energy is best expended elsewhere, which is fine. And then also, what is required for a really good user experience? How much do I need to be touched? How long is a person willing to be fussed with? Because there's always this there's this preference I make all the time. Has everybody here seen The Christmas Story? It's a movie about a little kid, BB gun, right? Okay. So I used to use this on clients all the time. That little boy spends weeks eagerly spending time listening to the Little Orphan Annie radio show. He runs through people, he's listening to it all the time, but he's copying down a code at the end of every single radio show. That is to be decoded through a decoder ring that he has, and he thinks it's a secret message. And he's so excited about what he's going to get because he spends all this time to do it. He goes into the bathroom, he decodes the message finally, and it says, "Drink more Ovaltine." And he says, "A stinking commercial." But this idea of we have to have a lot of empathy for the people that are coming all the way out here, how much energy they're willing to devote, and make sure the reward at the end of that is significant and is on parity with how much effort they've put to even talk to you guys. And right now, for example, the demo, to go through all of that stuff and then kind of like see a fish a little bit, it's just like, oh man, don't do that. That's a bummer. You're probably gonna piss some people off. So that's some of the stuff we'll make some suggestions about. Does that answers all three of your questions, sort of? Okay, cool. Okay, so results, really, what's that?
No, he's asking what Boris.
Oh,
And I'm saying, I don't know.
where's Boris? He's gonna watch this video recording, he's like, what the hell is he talking about? So the results. This is almost, for me, I'm giving myself a series of assignments, and this is kind of what I'm gonna be working on. Holistic. Right now, door-to-door, the experience is not holistic. How do you step in? How does the presentation look? What are the different lines on it? How does it feel? How does everything from what your presentations look like to how you talk about it, to what happens when they put on the headset, all feels like vision of the future. It feels like one stream of consciousness. Regardless, because it requires all of you to talk about it, it's a team that's building this, and all of you have expertise, but no matter who's talking about it in one element, it is over and over again, you're punching home this vision of the future. Because shockingly, people don't pay attention, they don't listen, and you have to say everything 10 times, at least. So we're gonna kind of think about that, but everything they see, feel, touch, hear should be part of your demo experience. Okay, bridging the gap between creative engineering and business. Now this doesn't accurately reflect every business, but almost every startup, especially in technology, is separated into these three groups. These three groups are not necessarily verticals within your business or departments, but they are cultural. And right now, you guys have some gaps in speaking to each other and agreeing about stuff. We'll get into some of that in the document. We probably won't get into the weeds about it right now, but we're going to talk a little bit, like our response document will be like, you guys really need to agree about A, B, and C between these two groups and between these two groups, because that's going to help us get to this holistic message. There's some disagreements, but also helping facilitate, like when we respond back and we make a series of recommendations, we're going to give you stuff that is going to facilitate dialogue from how the demo should work, how it should feel, is it deeper rounds, does Boris agree with Albert, does Albert agree with Doran? Like this is going to give you guys something, because we're outside of the organization, it's going to give you something all to react to, and we're going to, the first thing we come back to you with might not be what we make. But it might also facilitate, like, you know what? Yeah, deeper rounds. You know what? Yeah, wait, no, maybe we need pixies or something like that. But I think we need to create a series of catalysts to connect all you guys through this dialogue. So we're going to be your punching bag.
Adaptations for different groups, or this is
this is for you guys internally. For example, like let's say this is the UX group, and let's say that UX, to try and find the North Star, which needs to be expressed through the vision of the future by turning dumb objects into smart objects, becomes a very clear assignment, and that clear assignment is iterated upon until you actually have a functioning demo, instead of creating these tiny islands. But if engineering, which is the technology folks, are in agreement with it, and the biz people are in agreement with it because it'll help sell your product, then everybody shakes hands like, that's exactly what we're going to do for the next 6 months. And I think right now there's always going to be two assignments for the UX group. We were talking about this yesterday. There's these tiny, fast, and dirty, iterative things like, does the shader even work? But then there's these longer term things where you're constantly chipping away at getting to a demo that is underneath one brief, which right now doesn't feel like you guys currently have. And so bridges, and I talked about this yesterday too. We have to figure out how to bridge. You guys are deeply into the next. Everybody here is in the now. How do we take your extremely complicated story that is extraordinarily futuristic and make it practical for the now? And that goes back to, again, make it real. I know I'm really, really overemphasizing this, but prove me wrong, I'm not worried about that with you guys. We just have to kind of clean this up a little bit with some analogies, and prove me wrong is no problem. You're probably the smartest group of people I've gotten the pleasure of talking to, so I'm not worried about that. Which brings me to weaponization, which is a term I like to use about how
Flattery
these.
usually works. They're not always.
What's that?
I said flattery usually works, but not always.
Well, you guys, but this
He
is.
doesn't do that often.
I don't do it often. But this is where this weaponization needs to happen for Prove Me Wrong. Now, I think you guys there's all these different presentations, there's all these different elements of the demo that prove out different things, there are conversations you have all over the place. What I want to do is find a way to, because Lau is becoming a subject matter expert, and Albert, we've been talking to you a lot, I think this idea of trying to compress down the technologies and everything within it and turning them into analogies, first and foremost. Because you guys have all the details, but the analogies are then going to work. For example, before somebody comes in here to see Make It Real, you need an analogy. What is the analogy for foveated projection? And without getting into the physics of it, why is that important? Right now, it takes a long time for you guys to explain that. It should be like, this is the line, that's the example, moving on. And that way they're set up. So weaponizing through analogies, and then that way, when you guys are talking about your technology, it's really easy to unpack. Here's the analogy, and then here's the 8 slides of physics and information underneath it, and you just unfold it when you need it, and then collapse it back in.
Are you implying we need to cut down the number of slides?
You guys have like 40 presentations. Okay. You should have one. Okay.
I have one.
You just have one that you iterate on. Again, we're not typically in the business of making presentations, but for example, last month we worked for Facebook, and what we did for Facebook, we didn't make a demo, we made a book for them, and that book helped them explain augmented reality, not only to their internal stakeholders, but to all the content creators, and that the way of expressing to both engineers and creatives of the best uses of AR, it's communications design. Anyway, you guys need some of that. And so the analogies will be around your unique sales propositions from a story. We'll create I think there's analogies for all the technology and the vision and comms and experience. So anyway, it's a lot of stuff. That's the result of the last few days.
I have a question.
Sure, man.
What do we need to do?
What you need to do immediately is nothing. Well, no, that's not true. That's not true. I think there may be a little bit more soul searching about who your competitive set is,
Okay.
and who is coming in to talk to you guys. Who are you selling to? Now, again, I don't think it's going to change this. I think no matter what you have Make It Real, Prove Me Wrong. These 2 different classifications of that client that's coming in. But the better attuned we get, the better this script and presentation is going to work, because we know exactly who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, what we're doing is we're writing from the position of your clients. We're not writing from your position. We're going to be like, we're your client. This is what we want to hear. So this is what we should see in your presentations. That's going to help with it.
But we'll follow up with some assignments.
Yeah. We'll follow up with some stuff.
We'll have plenty of things for you guys.
Yeah.
I think it covered, but I just want to make sure that there's a certain audience of that are not to prove me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're objective,
Mm-hmm.
but they're skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
They fall into the Make It Real category.
Probably, yeah. Because if they're not coming from a hugely a background of technological sophistication, at least anywhere near on parity with you guys, then they fall into this category. I think here again, if we weaponize the way that you guys do the Prove Me Wrong, this should do a huge amount of heavy lifting for you. Like to the point where you don't have to do this all the time. Because I feel like you guys are probably doing this all the time. You might not need to if we do this part of the experience program. Because obviously this is the near future, right? That's the effect we need to get out of everybody that walks out of that room.
And prove me wrong, it's also very frustrating.
Yeah.
For Boris, it's always like,
It is
after
frustrating
the
because they
session,
don't get it.
Yeah.
he wants to kill everybody.
Yeah. So that's where maybe these analogies will work too.
What's the
It'll ease the frustration.
Proof and
Yeah, it'll ease the frustration a little bit. And again, this is not baked. I've spent 3 days with you guys. This is my gut reaction. We're gonna go back as a team. We're gonna go through over all this stuff. We have pages of notes. We're gonna refine this a little bit. We're gonna respond, and then you guys have an opportunity to look at that document and be like, I disagree with this, or I want to see more of this. Like this isn't okay. That's it. Like we have to. This is the beginning of a dialogue.
Right,
Right.
so what do you want to do
Very,
next
very
today?
stop the recording.
I'm impressed, I must say.
Oh, good.
Maybe I
Cool.
shouldn't tell you, but